The early morning sun cast long shadows across the pristine tarmac of Atlanta International Private Airport. Dr. Sarah Thompson's sleek black Mercedes pulled up to the terminal at precisely 7:15 a.m., her usual arrival time for morning flights. At 42 years old, she had built her reputation as one of the aviation industry's most respected executives, recently becoming the chief operations officer at Skywing Aviation. Sarah adjusted her navy blue blazer as she stepped out of her car, her designer heels clicking against the pavement. Her dark hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and her warm brown eyes reflected both confidence and kindness. The valet rushed forward, greeting her with a familiar smile. After all, she had been using this airport for the past 5 years, ever since Skywing Aviation had made Atlanta their headquarters. "Good morning, James," she said warmly, handing him her car keys. Her voice carried the gentle authority of someone who had earned their success through hard work and determination. The young valet had always appreciated how she remembered everyone's names, treating each airport staff member with genuine respect. Today was particularly important. Sarah was heading to Chicago for a board meeting where she would present Skywing's expansion plans. Under her leadership, the company had recently acquired a fleet of private jets, making them one of the largest private aviation services in the Southeast. The morning air felt crisp against her skin as she checked her leather briefcase one last time, ensuring she had all the necessary documents. Inside were the contracts that had taken months to negotiate, deals that would create hundreds of new jobs and establish training programs for aspiring pilots from underprivileged communities. This was more than just business for Sarah. It was about creating opportunities for others, just as her parents had taught her growing up in South Atlanta. As she walked toward the terminal entrance, Sarah reflected on her journey. 20 years ago, she had started as a junior analyst at a small airline company. Through countless late nights, advanced degrees, and unwavering determination, she had shattered one glass ceiling after another. Her mother, a high school teacher, and her father, a civil rights attorney, had always emphasized the importance of education and dignity in the face of adversity. Sarah checked her watch, 7:20 a.m. Her flight was scheduled for 8:00 a.m., giving her plenty of time for the usual security procedures. She had already received the standard pre-flight clearance email, and her pilot, Captain Rodriguez, had confirmed everything was ready for their departure to Chicago. Several other passengers were entering the terminal, a mix of corporate executives and business owners she occasionally crossed paths with. A few nodded in recognition. Sarah had become a familiar face in Atlanta's business community, known not just for her success but for her mentorship programs helping young women enter the aviation industry. Her phone buzzed with a message from her assistant, confirming that the Chicago team was ready for her arrival. The presentation materials had been delivered, and the board members were looking forward to her proposals. Sarah smiled, knowing that today's meeting could mark the beginning of Skywing's most ambitious chapter yet. As she approached the terminal's glass doors, Sarah straightened her shoulders, carrying herself with the quiet confidence that had become her trademark. The morning sun caught the gold pin on her lapel, a pair of wings her team had given her when she was promoted to COO. It was a reminder of how far she'd come and the responsibility she carried to help others rise. The security desk came into view through the glass doors. Sarah reached for her credentials, a routine she had performed hundreds of times before. She could see the usual morning security shift, except for one unfamiliar face, a new guard who was watching the entering passengers with unusual intensity. Little did Sarah know that in the next few minutes, her ordinary morning would transform into a moment that would test her character, challenge an institution, and ultimately inspire change across the aviation industry. But for now, she was simply Dr. Sarah Thompson, a respected executive preparing for another important day in her successful career. As she reached for the door handle, her mind was focused on the presentation ahead, the jobs her new proposal would create, and the future she was helping to build. The weight of her briefcase reminded her of the opportunities within those documents, opportunities that could open doors for the next generation of aviation professionals, regardless of their background. The terminal's automatic doors slid open with a soft hiss, welcoming her into what was about to become an unexpected turning point in both her life and the lives of many others. Sarah stepped into the terminal's bright lobby, her heels echoing against the polished marble floor. The morning light streamed through the large windows, creating a warm glow throughout the space. However, Before she could take more than 3 steps inside, a sharp voice cut through the peaceful morning atmosphere. "Stop right there." The command came from Richard Miller, the new security guard who had been watching the entrance with suspicious eyes. He was a tall man in his 50s, his uniform pressed too tight across his chest, and his face set in a hard frown. "This is a private terminal. You need to exit immediately." Sarah paused, maintaining her composure despite the unexpected confrontation. She reached into her blazer pocket and pulled out her credentials, the same high-level security clearance card she had used hundreds of times before at this very terminal. "Good morning," she said calmly, holding out her identification. "I'm Dr. Sarah Thompson, Chief Operations Officer of Skywing Aviation. I have a scheduled flight this morning." Her voice remained steady, professional, even as she noticed other passengers walking past them without being stopped. Richard barely glanced at her credentials. "Yeah, right," he scoffed, crossing his arms. "And I'm the President of the United States. Listen, lady, I don't know how you got past the gate, but this area is for authorized personnel and legitimate private jet passengers only." The busy morning terminal seemed to grow quiet. Several staff members who knew Sarah well watched the scene unfold with shocked expressions. Linda, the regular security supervisor who had worked there for years, was unfortunately out sick that day, leaving Richard, a temporary replacement, in charge of the morning shift. Sarah took a deep breath, remembering her father's words about maintaining dignity in the face of ignorance. She pulled out her phone and opened her flight details. "Sir, I understand you're doing your job, but here are my flight documents. I'm the COO of the company that owns the jet I'm boarding today. You can verify this information." Richard's face reddened. "Anyone can fake documents these days," he said loudly, drawing more attention. "I've worked security for 20 years, and I know what our typical passengers look like." His emphasis on the word typical hung heavy in the air, its meaning clear to everyone within earshot. At that moment, James, the valet who had parked Sarah's car, rushed in. "Mr. Miller, there's been a mistake. Dr. Thompson is one of our most regular passengers. She's the COO of Skywing Aviation." But Richard waved him away. "Stay out of this, kid. I'm handling security here." He turned back to Sarah. "Ma'am, if you don't leave now, I'll have to call for backup." Sarah noticed a young black girl watching from across the terminal, holding her mother's hand, both of them witnessing everything. In that moment, she knew this wasn't just about her anymore. With steady hands, she pulled out her phone again, this time opening the camera app. "Actually," she said clearly, "I'll be calling several people myself." She pressed record on her phone. "I'd like to document this interaction, and I'm also going to contact airport management, my company's legal team, and my pilot who's waiting for me." Other passengers had stopped now, many of them recognizing Sarah from business meetings and aviation industry events. A few had also taken out their phones, recording the discriminatory treatment unfolding before them. Richard's face flickered with uncertainty for the first time, but he doubled down. "This is a secure area. No recordings allowed." He stepped forward, trying to appear more intimidating. Sarah stood her ground, her voice carrying across the now silent terminal. "Sir, I'll repeat this one last time. I am Dr. Sarah Thompson, Chief Operations Officer of Skywing Aviation. Your behavior right now is being recorded, and I strongly suggest you contact your supervisor immediately." 2 other security guards in the distance were quickly approaching, their faces concerned as they recognized Sarah. Behind them, a man in a suit was rushing forward. Mark Chen, the airport's operations manager, who had been alerted by one of the desk staff. The morning sun continued to stream through the windows, illuminating the scene for all to witness. In that moment, standing in the terminal she had walked through countless times before, Sarah Thompson wasn't just defending her right to be there. She was standing up for every person who had ever been judged unfairly at first glance. The confrontation was far from over, but something significant had already changed in the terminal's atmosphere. The power dynamic had shifted, and everyone present knew they were witnessing a moment that would have lasting consequences. The tension in the terminal continued to build as Mark Chen, the operations manager, swiftly approached the scene. His usually cheerful face was etched with concern as he took in the situation. Sarah's phone continued recording, its red light a steady reminder that everything was being documented. "Dr. Thompson," Mark called out, slightly out of breath from his rush across the terminal. "I just got word of what's happening. I sincerely apologize for this situation. He turned to Richard Miller, whose face had begun to show the first signs of doubt. Mr. Miller, this is absolutely unacceptable. Dr. Thompson is not only authorized to be here, but is one of our most valued clients. Richard shifted uncomfortably, but still tried to maintain his position. Sir, I was just following security protocols. We can't just let people walk in because others vouch for them. Sarah spoke up, her voice clear and measured. Mr. Miller, I understand the importance of security protocols. However, I've shown you my credentials, flight documentation, and company identification. What specific protocol states that these should be ignored while other passengers walk through freely? She gestured to several people who had passed without question during their interaction. The young black girl and her mother were still watching. Sarah noticed the mother whispering something to her daughter, who stood straighter as she observed how Sarah handled the situation. This silent audience strengthened Sarah's resolve even more. By now, a small crowd had gathered at a respectful distance. Among them was Michael Porter, CEO of a tech company and a frequent flyer from the terminal. He stepped forward, his face showing clear disapproval at the situation. I've sat across from Dr. Thompson in dozens of business meetings, Michael announced loudly. She's one of the most respected executives in our industry. The fact that we're even having this discussion is ridiculous. Sarah raised her hand slightly, a subtle gesture that somehow commanded attention from everyone present. While I appreciate the support, she said calmly, this isn't about my professional achievements or who can vouch for me. This is about proper security procedures being applied equally to all passengers. She turned back to Richard, who was now visibly sweating. Mr. Miller, I'd like you to explain exactly what made you single me out. What specific security concern prompted you to stop me while letting others pass? Please be explicit in your reasoning. The silence that followed her question was deafening. Richard opened and closed his mouth several times, but no reasonable explanation came out. Mark Chen stepped in again. Dr. Thompson is right. This is about equal treatment and professional conduct. He turned to the two other security guards who had arrived. Please escort Mr. Miller to the office. We'll need a full incident report. As Richard was led away, Sarah noticed James, the valet, giving her a small thumbs up from across the terminal. The young girl who had been watching broke into a wide smile. Several airport staff members approached Sarah with bottles of water and apologies, but she politely raised her hand again. Thank you, but what I prefer right now is to have a constructive discussion about preventing similar incidents in the future. She checked her watch. There was still time before her flight. Looking at Mark, she continued, I believe this is an opportunity for positive change. My company would be happy to help develop better training protocols for security staff. The mother of the young girl finally approached Sarah, her daughter beside her. Dr. Thompson, I just wanted to say thank you. My daughter wants to be a pilot, and seeing you stand up for yourself with such grace, well, it means a lot. Sarah smiled warmly at the young girl. What's your name, sweetheart? Jasmine, the girl replied shyly. Well, Jasmine, keep dreaming about those wings. The sky has room for all of us. Sarah reached into her briefcase and pulled out a business card, handing it to Jasmine's mother. Please email me. I'd love to have Jasmine visit our youth aviation program. As she finally headed toward her gate, Sarah could hear the positive murmurs behind her. She had stood her ground not with anger or hostility, but with dignity and purpose. The incident wasn't over. There would be reports to file and changes to implement. But at this moment, she had shown everyone present, especially young Jasmine, that courage comes in many forms. The morning sun had risen higher now, and its light seemed a little brighter as Sarah walked toward her gate, her head held high, ready for whatever came next. The next 30 minutes in the terminal transformed into an unexpected show of solidarity. Mark Chen had moved everyone to a private conference room near the gates, where the atmosphere was both serious and supportive. The large windows overlooked the runway where Sarah's jet waited, its departure temporarily delayed as the situation unfolded. Dr. Thompson, Mark began, his hands clasped in front of him on the polished conference table. I've already contacted our board of directors. They want to speak with you personally about this incident. He paused, looking genuinely distressed. In my 15 years managing this terminal, nothing like this has ever happened. As they spoke, more people began arriving at the conference room. Jennifer Martinez, the terminal's head of security, rushed in, still wearing her coat. She had been called in from her day off after hearing about the incident. I worked with Linda to personally approve Dr. Thompson's security clearance last year, Jennifer explained, her voice tight with anger. Every single one of our regular security staff knows her. Mr. Miller was a temporary replacement who clearly ignored our most basic protocols. Michael Porter, the tech CEO who had spoken up earlier, had stayed behind to offer his support. He sat across from Sarah, his laptop open. I've already emailed the presidents of 6 other companies who use this terminal regularly, he said. We're all prepared to make formal statements about what we witnessed. What touched Sarah most, however, was the steady stream of airport staff who came by, baggage handlers, maintenance workers, coffee shop employees, all sharing stories of how she had treated them with kindness over the years. Maria from the coffee kiosk recalled how Sarah had helped her son with college applications for aviation school. Tony from maintenance remembered when she had insisted on thanking his entire team after they worked overtime during a snowstorm. You've always seen us, Maria said simply, her eyes bright with emotion. Now it's our turn to stand up for you. While this support was touching, Sarah remained focused on the bigger picture. She pulled out her tablet and began taking notes. What we need, she said firmly, is systematic change. This isn't just about one security guard or one incident. Jennifer nodded eagerly. We've already begun a review of our entire security training program, but we'd be honored if you consider helping us redesign it. Outside the conference room, word had spread throughout the terminal. Jasmine and her mother had delayed their own flight to provide written statements. Other passengers who had witnessed the incident did the same, creating a thick folder of testimonies on Mark's desk. Captain Rodriguez, Sarah's pilot, entered the room with purpose. Dr. Thompson, whenever you're ready, we can depart. But first, our entire flight crew wants to go on record about your professionalism and regular presence at this terminal. Sarah looked around the room, taking in all these people who had chosen to stand with her. It was a powerful reminder that change often began with one incident but required many voices to create lasting impact. Thank you all, she said, her voice warm but determined. But I want to make something clear. This support is wonderful, but it shouldn't take having a high-level position or well-known colleagues for someone to be treated with respect. That's exactly what we need to change. As she spoke, her phone buzzed with messages from her company's board members. They weren't just supportive. They were ready to take action. The chairman himself had texted, "Whatever resources you need to make this right, you have our full backing." Mark Chen stood up, his face showing renewed determination. Dr. Thompson is absolutely right. This isn't just about making amends for one incident. This is about ensuring every single person who walks through our terminal is treated with equal respect and dignity. Through the conference room windows, Sarah could see the morning sun fully risen now, illuminating the runway where more planes were taking off into the clear blue sky. Each of those planes carried people of all backgrounds, all deserving of the same respect and professional treatment. The incident that had started with one guard's prejudice had sparked something much larger. In this room full of supporters, Sarah could see the beginning of real change taking shape. But she knew this was just the start. There was much more work to be done. She glanced at her watch, knowing her meeting in Chicago couldn't wait much longer. However, what had happened here this morning would have far more impact than any business deal she could close today. As the conference room meeting drew to a close, Sarah rose from her chair with purpose. She had spent the last hour not just receiving support, but transforming a negative incident into an opportunity for education and change. The room fell silent as she prepared to address everyone one final time before her departure. Before I leave for Chicago, Sarah began, her voice carrying the weight of experience, I want to outline some concrete steps forward. She picked up her tablet, where she had been taking notes throughout the discussion. The morning sun streaming through the windows cast a warm glow across her face as she spoke. Mark Chen and Jennifer Martinez leaned forward, their notepads ready. The security team members present, the airport staff, and even Michael Porter focused intently on her words. What they were about to hear wasn't just a response to discrimination. It was a masterclass in professional problem-solving. First, Sarah continued, this incident highlights gaps in your current security training. But instead of simply pointing out problems, I'd like to offer solutions. She turned to Jennifer. My team at Skywing Aviation has developed comprehensive diversity and inclusion protocols. We'd be happy to share these resources and help adapt them for airport security. As she spoke, Jasmine and her mother quietly re-entered the room. Sarah smiled at them before continuing, knowing that her words needed to reach everyone, from seasoned executives to young dreamers like Jasmine. Second, we need clear reporting procedures. Every passenger, regardless of their position or status, should know exactly how to report unfair treatment. She gestured to her phone, which had recorded the earlier incident. Documentation is crucial, but so is having a system that takes these reports seriously. Maria, the coffee kiosk worker, raised her hand timidly. Dr. Thompson, we staff members sometimes see things too. Could we have a way to report incidents we witness? Sarah's face brightened. Excellent point, Maria. Yes, this system should be accessible to everyone, passengers, staff, and security personnel alike. Sometimes the most valuable insights come from people working on the ground. The next hour transformed into an impromptu workshop. Sarah drew from her years of executive experience, but also from her personal understanding of navigating prejudice in professional spaces. She shared stories of other airports that had successfully implemented similar changes, carefully avoiding naming specific individuals while highlighting successful strategies. Remember, she emphasized, looking particularly at the younger staff members, professionalism isn't just about following rules. It's about treating everyone with equal respect and dignity, regardless of their appearance or position. As she spoke, Mark Chen's assistant was rapidly typing every suggestion into a document that would later become the foundation for the airport's new training manual. Jennifer Martinez had filled several pages of her notebook, occasionally nodding vigorously as Sarah touched on particularly important points. Even Michael Porter, who had initially seemed ready to demand immediate firings, was now taking a more measured approach. "This is why you're the best in the business, Sarah," he commented. "You're turning this into a learning opportunity for everyone." Near the end of the session, Sarah noticed Jasmine watching her with wide, admiring eyes. She paused her professional discussion to address the young girl directly. "Jasmine, what do you think about all this? What would make you feel welcome at an airport?" The room fell silent as the young girl thought carefully before answering. "I think people should look at me and see what I can become, not what they think I am." Sarah smiled warmly. "That's exactly right, and that's what we're working to achieve here." Looking at her watch, Sarah realized it was time to head to her flight, but before leaving, she had one final thought to share. "What happened this morning was unfortunate, but our response to it will determine its true impact. Let's make sure this becomes a story of positive change, not just a cautionary tale." As she gathered her belongings, Sarah could see the determination on the faces around her. The morning's ugly incident had transformed into something powerful, a catalyst for real change. She had shown everyone present how to handle discrimination with grace, professionalism, and constructive action. Captain Rodriguez appeared at the door, signaling that the jet was ready for departure. As Sarah prepared to leave, she knew that her response to this incident would have lasting effects far beyond this morning, this airport, or even this city. She had demonstrated that true leadership isn't just about having authority, it's about using difficult moments to create positive change. The next few hours brought swift and decisive action throughout the terminal. While Sarah's private jet soared towards Chicago, the airport management team worked with unprecedented speed to address the morning's events. Mark Chen had never seen his office so busy, with phones ringing constantly and emails flooding in from across the aviation industry. Richard Miller sat in a small office down the hall, his security badge already confiscated. The temporary agency that had placed him was being contacted, and his brief employment at the airport was coming to an end. But more importantly, his actions had sparked a complete review of the airport's hiring and training procedures. "It's not enough to just remove one person," Jennifer Martinez explained to her security team during an emergency meeting. She stood at the front of the briefing room, where pictures of Sarah Thompson and other regular clients were now being added to a digital recognition system. "We need to make sure this never happens again." The young security officers listened intently as Jennifer outlined immediate changes. Starting that very day, every shift would begin with a briefing on professional conduct and anti-discrimination policies. The regular security staff, who had known and respected Dr. Thompson for years, felt particularly motivated to improve their procedures. In the terminal's coffee shop, Maria was sharing the morning's events with her customers. Dr. Thompson didn't just defend herself, she explained to a group of interested passengers. She turned it into a lesson for everyone. The story was spreading through the airport community, but not as gossip, rather as an example of how to handle discrimination with dignity and create positive change. Mark Chen spent the afternoon in video conferences with the airport's board of directors. The boardroom's large screen displayed concerned faces as they discussed the incident and its implications. Dr. Thompson's response was exemplary. One board member noted, "But we shouldn't have needed her to teach us how to handle this situation." By mid-afternoon, the airport had issued an official statement. "We acknowledge and deeply regret this morning's incident involving discriminatory treatment of one of our most valued clients. Immediate action has been taken, and we are implementing comprehensive changes to our security protocols. We are grateful for Dr. Thompson's professional response and her willingness to help us improve our practices." The statement was just the beginning. Within hours, new signs appeared throughout the terminal. "Report unfair treatment," they read, displaying a QR code linking to a newly created reporting system. The airport's IT team worked overtime to get the system running, inspired by Sarah's emphasis on immediate action. Jasmine and her mother had finally departed for their own flight, but not before Jasmine had written a letter to Sarah. The letter sat on Mark's desk, waiting to be forwarded to Sarah's office. "Dear Dr. Thompson," it began, "today you showed me what being brave looks like." In the security office, Jennifer was already reviewing applications for Richard's replacement. The job posting now included specific requirements about diversity awareness and professional conduct. "We're not just hiring security officers," she told her team. "We're hiring people who understand the responsibility of being the first face our passengers see." The airport's training department had canceled all afternoon sessions to begin revising their materials. Sarah's suggestion about incorporating real-world scenarios and experiences was being implemented immediately. Videos were being prepared, policies rewritten, and new guidelines established. By evening, when the sunset painted the terminal windows in orange and purple, the airport felt different. Staff members walked with a new awareness, security officers showed extra care in checking credentials, and there was a shared sense that something important had changed. Mark Chen stood at his office window, watching planes take off into the darkening sky. His phone buzzed with a message. Sarah had landed safely in Chicago and was heading to her meeting. Despite everything that had happened, she had still found time to check in and make sure the changes they'd discussed were underway. "Today was a wake-up call," he said to Jennifer, who had stopped by with the day's incident reports. "But thanks to Dr. Thompson, we're wide awake now." As the airport's evening shift began, new briefing materials were already being distributed. The day's events had showed everyone that change didn't have to be slow. It could happen as quickly as people were willing to make it happen. The immediate consequences of the morning's discrimination had become a catalyst for immediate improvement, proving that sometimes the worst moments could lead to the best changes. In the quiet of the evening terminal, the impact of Sarah Thompson's dignity and professionalism continued to ripple outward, transforming procedures, attitudes, and hearts. 1 month after the incident, Sarah Thompson stood before a packed conference room at Skywing Aviation's headquarters. The room was filled with representatives from major airports across the country, all eager to learn from what had now become known as the Atlanta response. "Change doesn't always come from committees and lengthy proposals," Sarah began, her voice carrying to every corner of the room. "Sometimes it comes from moments that force us to look at ourselves and ask if we're truly living up to our values." Behind her, a presentation screen showed statistics from the new reporting system that had been implemented at Atlanta's private terminal. The numbers told an impressive story. In just 1 month, the terminal had transformed its entire security operation. Every staff member had completed enhanced training, developed with input from diversity experts and aviation professionals. The reporting system had logged hundreds of responses, not of complaints, but of positive interactions between staff and passengers. Mark Chen, sitting in the front row, smiled as Sarah shared their progress. His terminal had become a model for others, with airports from across the nation sending representatives to study their new procedures. The incident that could have damaged their reputation had instead made them leaders in promoting inclusive practices. Jennifer Martinez stepped up to join Sarah at the podium. Together, they had created a comprehensive training program that was now being adopted by other airports. Our security staff isn't just checking credentials anymore, Jennifer explained to the audience. They're building relationships with our passengers while maintaining professional standards. In the audience, Jasmine and her mother sat as special guests. The young girl was now enrolled in Skywing's youth aviation program, attending weekend classes where she learned about flight mechanics and airport operations. She wore a junior pilot's pin proudly on her jacket, a gift from Sarah during her first class. But the most significant change, Sarah continued, has been in how we view our responsibility to each other. She clicked to the next slide, showing photographs of the terminal's diverse staff and passengers. Aviation isn't just about moving people from one place to another. It's about connecting humans, respecting dignity, and ensuring everyone has equal access to the skies. The changes hadn't stopped at the terminal. Skywing Aviation had launched a new scholarship program, offering opportunities to underrepresented groups in aviation. Sarah had ensured that the program wasn't just about pilots. It included training for air traffic controllers, maintenance technicians, and aviation managers. Maria from the coffee kiosk had been promoted to customer service trainer, sharing her experiences about creating a welcoming environment for all passengers. Her story about Sarah's handling of the discrimination incident had become part of the training material, showing new employees how to turn difficult situations into opportunities for growth. Even Michael Porter, the tech CEO who had witnessed the original incident, had joined the cause. His company now sponsored technology upgrades for the terminal's security systems, ensuring that professional treatment was backed by efficient, unbiased procedures. The most touching moment of the presentation came when Sarah shared a wall of photographs from the terminal. It showed staff members and passengers from all backgrounds, each holding signs with their aviation dreams and achievements. Jasmine's picture was there, holding a sign that read "Future Pilot," breaking barriers one flight at a time. What happened that morning could have ended with anger and division, Sarah said, her voice softening. Instead, it became a catalyst for the changes we needed to make anyway. She gestured to the diverse audience before her. Look around this room. We all share the same sky. Shouldn't we share the same opportunities to reach it? As the presentation concluded, airport representatives lined up to speak with Sarah and Jennifer. They weren't just asking about security procedures or training programs. They wanted to know how to create lasting cultural change in their own facilities. Mark Chen watched it all with pride. His terminal's incident report rates had dropped significantly, while passenger satisfaction scores had soared. But more importantly, he saw how his staff carried themselves with new awareness and purpose. Behind the scenes, Sarah's team was already working on the next phase, a national certification program for airports that demonstrated excellence in inclusive practices. The program would set standards for security training, staff diversity, and passenger treatment. What had started as one guard's discriminatory action had sparked a movement within the aviation industry. Sarah Thompson had shown that the best response to discrimination wasn't just confrontation, it was transformation. As she looked out at the room full of aviation professionals eager to learn and change, she knew that this was just the beginning. The catalyst had done its work, and the change was spreading, one airport at a time. 6 months after the incident, the Atlanta International Private Terminal looked remarkably different. On this bright autumn morning, Sarah Thompson walked through the same entrance where she had once been stopped, but everything had changed. The security desk now featured a diverse team of professionally trained officers, and a large sign read, "Welcome to Aviation's most inclusive terminal." Today was special. The terminal was hosting its first Aviation Dreams Career Fair, an event that had drawn hundreds of young people interested in aviation careers. Sarah smiled as she saw Jasmine, now wearing her official junior pilot trainee uniform, helping to guide visitors to different information booths. "Dr. Thompson," Jasmine called out, her face beaming. "We already have 50 students signed up for the scholarship program." She had become something of a junior ambassador for the terminal's youth initiatives, sharing her story to inspire other young people who dreamed of careers in aviation. The main terminal hall had been transformed into an exhibition space. Maria, now the head of customer relations, managed a booth showcasing the terminal's new training programs. Behind her, a video played showing the positive changes implemented over the past 6 months. Richard Miller's discriminatory action had become a teaching moment in the video, followed by examples of how proper, respectful security procedures should be conducted. Mark Chen approached Sarah, holding a thick folder. "The numbers are incredible," he said excitedly. "Our passenger satisfaction rates are the highest they've ever been. Other terminals are asking to adopt our training programs, and we've had 0 discrimination incidents reported in the past 5 months." Jennifer Martinez stood at her security team's booth, proudly explaining their new protocols to interested visitors. Her team now included officers from various backgrounds, each trained not just in security procedures, but in cultural awareness and professional communication. The security desk that had once been a point of confrontation had become a model of inclusive practices. The most touching display was the Wall of Wings, a collection of photographs and stories from people who had been inspired by the changes at the terminal. There were pictures of new pilots, maintenance technicians, air traffic controllers, and aviation executives, each sharing how the terminal's transformation had influenced their career paths. Michael Porter, who had witnessed the original incident, was now a regular speaker at the terminal's professional development sessions. What Dr. Thompson showed us, he told a group of attentive listeners, was that real leadership isn't about avoiding problems. It's about transforming them into opportunities for growth. As Sarah walked through the career fair, she stopped to talk with young aspirants, sharing her experiences and offering encouragement. Parents approached her with tears in their eyes, thanking her for creating opportunities their children hadn't thought possible before. The terminal's success had attracted national attention. Aviation industry magazines had featured their transformation story, and other airports were following their lead. The Atlanta model, as it had become known, was being implemented at terminals across the country. Near the end of the day, Sarah found herself back at the security desk where everything had started. The new team of officers greeted her with professional respect, not because of her position, but because that was how they treated everyone. Dr. Thompson called out a familiar voice. It was Jasmine's mother, now employed as the terminal's community outreach coordinator. "Would you like to see the latest graduation numbers from our youth program?" The statistics were impressive. 87 young people had completed their initial aviation training, with many more enrolled. The program had expanded to include internships, mentoring, and job placement assistance. What had started as a response to discrimination had grown into a comprehensive initiative for aviation education and career development. As the career fair wound down, Sarah gathered everyone for a closing ceremony. Standing at the podium, she looked out at the diverse faces before her, young dreamers, seasoned professionals, and everyone in between. 6 months ago, she began, this terminal taught us all an important lesson. Change doesn't just happen through policies and procedures. It happens when people come together and decide to make things better, not just for themselves, but for everyone who comes after them. The sunset painted the terminal windows in brilliant colors as the event concluded. Young Jasmine stood near the entrance, helping to hand out program certificates. She watched as Sarah chatted with the last few attendees, still sharing her wisdom and encouragement even after the long day. The terminal that had once been the site of discrimination had become a beacon of hope and opportunity. Sarah Thompson's courage hadn't just changed one security guard's behavior, it transformed an entire industry's approach to inclusion and respect. The lasting impact would be felt for generations to come, as new aviation professionals took to the skies, carrying with them the lessons learned on that memorable morning.